Good morning and welcome to the class. In our last class, we learnt about a very interesting application of biology field where we see that our health is protected. We spoke about our immune system and the technology that helps us to maintain our immune system. We spoke about vaccination, then we spoke about certain drugs, certain steroids, and also some of the techniques where we are trying to control the drug abuse on our body and our system. In today's class, we are talking about a technology which is very important to us right now, again for survival. If one is, in our previous chapter, we spoke about the system which helps us to give protection inside the body, and now we are going to talk about one chapter where the technology is used which helps us to survive. So we are going to discuss about a chapter where we have enough of food for the ever increasing population, because any organism, if it has to survive and thrive, food is something which is very important. Without food we cannot survive, right? So if the population is increasing and we all should eat, how can we get food for all these people? There has to be some mechanism where we can increase the yield of food that we are growing. We should increase the food production. But please do remember, as population increases, the land area available for agriculture also reduces, and therefore growing large amounts of the same type of food crops is not going to help us at all. We need to think of some kind of new technology which helps us to increase the yield. And in this particular chapter, we are going to talk such important biological principles, okay, which helps to increase various animals used as food, which we call as animal husbandry. We also talk about plant breeding, different types of breeding techniques which helps to increase the yield. And not only all this, with all these techniques available, and as I was telling you in the last few classes, again there is use of even microorganisms and certain micro plants which belong to the group of certain algae, which can be used as a very good source of proteins. So we are going to discuss about that as well. And we also talk about increasing the production of plants in a very small area. Okay, so we'll try to grow plants in a lab. Believe it or not, right now we are giving the plants artificial light, and see that from one single leaf I can grow thousands and thousands of plants. A process, a technique, a technology that is being very recently discovered, which is called as tissue culture. So in this particular chapter, which is we are talking about various strategies for increasing the food production, and we are mainly focusing on animal husbandry, plant breeding, certain single cell proteins, and then we will also discuss quite a lot on tissue culture. So let us start off with the first strategies in food production, and there we will try to discuss on animal husbandry. We will discuss on animal husbandry. You know what is animal husbandry? Okay, animal husbandry is, I asked in one of the schools what animal husbandry is, and they said maybe getting animals married and taking care of the husband of the animal is animal husbandry. But unfortunately it is not that way. Animal husbandry is basically some kind of practice. Now this practice is involved in breeding and raising livestock. Breeding and raising livestock. So what exactly do we mean here? You know, if there are some kind of cattle or fish, birds, or any of such animals, all these animals are very much required by humans because we eat them as food. Now, when we are eating them as food, obviously their number has to be maintained, right? And and these animals survive on other animals for food, or they might also survive on grains. They might grow some, they might eat some plants, they might be herbivores or they might be carnivores. Now, depending on what kind of animal that you are interested in growing, you are trying to practice uh, such that those animals would grow well. Those animals which are grown for food is what we call as livestock. We call it as livestock. And to breed them and to raise them, we carry out various techniques, various some kind of modifications just to see that their breeding and raising becomes easier. Now, those practices are what we call as animal husbandry. Now, what exactly do we do here? Uh, Now, to be very frank, we still do not know if this should be considered as a science or an art, because even growing plants or growing livestock, you see that there is a lot of vital skill, and you have to do lots of experiments, lot of some kind of modifications. And not only all this, please do remember, you should also show the plants and animals love, so that their breeding and raising becomes easier. Okay, so that is something which has to be done. Now, in the case of animal husbandry, we take care of these livestock, we take care of this breeding processes, and after the breeding is done, we also take care of raising those organisms, raising these animals. Now, which animals are generally grown or taken care of in animal husbandry? We have various animals. Maybe you would have seen that buffaloes, cows, pigs, then horses, various cattle, sheep, camels, goats. All these are very useful for man, and therefore livestock includes all this. But do not forget poultry farming, because poultry is considered to be one of the very important food source, rich meat source for people who eat meat. And then fisheries also come under this livestock. And when we are talking about fisheries, this includes rearing of small fishes, catching them and selling them. We take care of, when we say fisheries, it's just not only the fish, it includes fishes, it includes mollusks, it includes crustaceans like prawns and crabs, it also includes shellfish, the mollusk, and all this are part and group of our fisheries. You don't believe that from a long time we humans have been growing various animals: bees, silkworm, prawns, crabs, fishes, birds, pigs, cattle, sheep. All this started from a very long time, when man just settled down with agriculture. He wanted some help in agriculture. At the same time, he also wanted some animal products like milk, eggs, meat, or wool and silk, honey, and all that. And therefore this kind of cultivating them started pretty much the same time the agriculture practices started. And now comes the most interesting part. We say most of people in India, we are kind of vegetarians or things like that, you will be surprised that around 70% of the world livestock population comes from two countries. One is India and the other one is China. So 70% of livestock population is in India and is in China. But if you note, the contribution to the world's farm, okay, is only 25% because the productivity per unit is very low. The reason is because of various factors, some of the ethical reasons that we have ourselves, and some of the problems with our technology and the way we take care of our animals. Okay, so we do have lot of conventional practices of animal breeding. We do take care of them, but whatever said and done, there are many new technologies that are available, and all these have to be applied so that we can see some kind of improvement in quality and productivity. And just imagine, if we have 70% of livestock and we are using newer technologies, how much of what we can say, the productivity per unit area would increase, right? So that is something which is very important, that has to be done right now. And in fact, that is also one of the main reasons why it is there in your book. Okay, so we will start off learning more about animal husbandry. Okay, now there is one thing that has to be really managed very well when we are talking about animal husbandry, and that is some kind of management. Okay, what is that we need to manage? What is that we need to manage when we are talking about animal husbandry? Now, when we are talking about animal husbandry, we need to concentrate on two important aspects. The first one is management of farms, and the second one is management of farm animals. So these are the two things that has to be managed. Okay, so how do we do this? Okay, so the first thing is, we have been practicing lots and lots of conventional practices to manage the farms as well as to manage the farm animals, but this is not boosting our food production, and therefore we have to think about managing these two in such a way that the food productivity increases. Okay, now as you all know, for every type of livestock that we are discussing, the management of farms as well as management of farm animals would differ. Therefore, when we are talking about management of farms and farm animals, the practices that we follow for each one of the livestock would be very different. So let us try to learn about some of the types of farm management for different livestock. Now let us talk about the first one, which is the dairy farm management. Dairy farm management. You know what is dairying? Dairying is the management of animals for milk or milk and its products, and all this obviously for human consumption. So which animals would you see here? In dairy farm management, it would be our cows, then it would be our goats, buffaloes, and all these animals which give this milk is converted into some form where you see that it gives us a milk product. Now in the case of dairy farm management, we are going to discuss about various processes and systems that increase the yield, and it also improves the quality of the milk. Okay, so there are two things when we are talking here, talking about dairy farm management. The first one is that increase the yield. Obviously, since the population is increasing, the yield also has to be increased. At the same time, the quality of the milk also should be good enough for consumption. So, what do you think would be some of the technology that can be implemented here to increase the yield and the quality? Obviously, we have some kind of farm management systems here, and let us discuss about them now. Okay, now talking about milk yield, you see that milk yield is completely dependent on the quality of the breeds that we have in the farm. Quality of breeds present in the farm. There are certain breeds which give lots of milk, and there are also certain breeds which give maybe a liter or two per day. Okay, so we have to select the good breeds for having high yielding potential of milk. Now, what exactly do we mean by high yielding potential? High yielding potential. Now, any cow we say has a high yielding potential when it has a high yielding of milk, whatever is the case of the climatic conditions of the area. Okay, so basically what we are trying to say here is the cow's yield is not completely dependent on the environmental factors. So that is one very important thing that generally people look for. The second one, which is also very important, is showing a very high disease resistance. Okay, if it has a very good resistance toward diseases, you see that it is very easy for us to manage those livestock in the farm, right? So you can just if you just keep it in a very good house, give it adequate water, and you see that there are no diseases, then obviously the cattle will give good yield of milk, right? Then you see that when you are feeding cattle, okay, it should be done in a very scientific manner. What exactly do we mean by scientific manner? Just like as we humans have a balanced diet, we say, right, we need to eat this much of proteins, this much of carbohydrates, so on and so forth. Even cattle obviously need a balanced diet. So you should look at the quality and the quantity of the fodder, see that it is kind of giving all the needs for the growth of these cattle, see that it does not have any spores to induce some kind of disease. So these are the things that we need to take care of when we talk about the scientific manner of feeding animals. Okay, now the most important thing that is very important, which I also have noticed in many places, is that there has to be a wonderful stringent cleanliness and hygiene. So it's that the place has to be neat, it has to be clean, the cattle should be kept neat and clean, and even the handlers should be maintaining that particular hygiene. And that is the time when you see that most of the diseases can be kept at bay. Most of the diseases are kept at bay when we maintain cleanliness and we give good food, right? So all this have to be done. Please note that what all we spoke right now is not to be seen only with respect to the cattle, but even during milking, or when the milk is stored, or when the milk is getting transported from one place to other, or when milk is converted from one farm to any of its products. In all these times, you see that cleanliness should be something which is of paramount importance. Okay. uh, Actually speaking, right now you see that most of these things that we just discussed, all these are some kind of mechanized and automated, so it reduces the chance of direct contact of the produce with the handler. Okay, so most of the times you see that there are machines for milking, machines that are being used to keep in storage, even the transport of the milk, you see that they're all sterilized, and all this is kind of automized. But even then, you have to ensure the stringent measures to kind of maintain all this, and that would require regular inspections. You have to maintain records to see where there can be a problem. Okay, you should also be able to identify and rectify the problem as soon as it occurs. So for that, a proper data record keeping work has to be done, right? uh, then you don't believe that in most of the countries we do have livestock that is actually managed by one or the other veterinary doctor. It is something like, like how we have annual reviews of taking care of our electronic items in our houses. So there are certain doctors who are assigned to do that work, where they take care of all the cattle in that particular area, and they have to kind of give a health certificate for them, so that their health, their uh, other uh, conditions, the cleanliness, the practices that they're following are all fit for uh, for us to consume the milk given from that area, right? So these are some of the things that has to be done in the case of dairy farm management. After learning about dairy farm management, we realize that there are many things that has to be taken care of to increase the yield and to have good disease resistant animals on the farm. Now, when we are talking about the next farm management, which happens to be poultry farm management, the cleanliness remains something which is constant. It has to be maintained in all the farms, irrespective of what livestock we are growing. But you see that the food or that is required by the birds, or which we call the class, the poultry, the domesticated fowl or the birds, they are completely different. Now, this poultry includes animals like chicken, ducks, turkey, and geese, and various other birds. Okay, when we're talking about poultry, generally we are referring only to the meat and not to the eggs. But as in dairy farming, you see that selection of a particular bird which has superb meat and also which is disease free is something that is very, very important. That's mainly because if you just look at the birds, these are also warm blooded, and certain bacteria and virus which infect birds will also infect humans, and therefore there is a very, very stringent requirement to see that they are disease free. In fact, there are many birds which spread certain flu diseases, and they are not at all considered to be safe, and some of them are even fatal. Hence, selection of disease free animals is something which is very, very important. Then we have to see that there has to be a proper feed given to them, then there has to be enough water, hygiene should be maintained, health care is something which is utmost importance. In fact, you would have seen certain reports on bird flu viruses. It was a scare in the country, and people just stopped eating birds, and the poultry farms were actually burnt. Can you believe it? Poultry farms which had thousands of birds in it, they were all burnt mainly because we were all so scared of the bird flu virus, and we do not have a cure for this particular disease. Hence, we have to be extremely careful about from where we obtain these birds, how healthy they are, and we should also find out if the egg or the chicken is really fit for our consumption. Okay, whatever said and done, you should always see to it that the farm management is something that is very, very important to keep the livestock in check. If all this is proper and fine, then obviously you see that the livestock would be good. Now, the next thing that we should know about is some of the breeding techniques that are involved to see that we get good species, good breeds of animals. And that would be the topic for our next class. So, in our next class, we would be discussing on animal breeding techniques uh, for various animals, be it cattle, be it poultry, and even some kind of fisheries. Fine. Okay, see you again in the next class. Any doubts, make a note. We'll discuss in the next class. See you then. Bye.